Shalom, friends. Today I'm going to tell you about birth story number 5. That is my Andrew. Sometimes we call him Drew or Drewy. So I would like to start by saying that before I found out that I was pregnant with Andrew, I was facing a moral dilemma. Reminds me of that song, Audio Adrenaline, the Houseplant song. It's funny. You guys should look it up. Anyways, so sometimes Aaron, he kind of jokes around saying, well, what if we heard God wrong and he never said that we should be essentially a no birth control family? And I'm just like, well, no, Aaron, we didn't hear him wrong. And I know that he most of the time was kidding, but usually I think when somebody is kidding, there is a tiny bit of truth in what they're saying. So that time, I just really felt like burdened with this question. Oh my goodness, what if we heard God wrong? And I felt like I just really needed to take it to God, the question again, and talk to him about it and seek clarity in that area of our lives. And gosh, I mean, it probably wasn't more than 2 days later that God used a friend of mine to just direct me, I guess, to a website of a Christian group that encourages families. I don't really know what to say about it. It's called aboverubies.org, I think it is. And it was kind of funny, even the way that she directed me there. She's like, oh, I have some friends who have long hair and they don't wear makeup like you, and they are involved in a group called Above Rubies. I thought it was funny because I just happen to not wear makeup and I happen to have long hair, so she thought about her friends and me and put us together, and she told me about Above Rubies, and I actually remembered to look it up online, and God really used that to encourage me and just make it abundantly clear to me that, we didn't mishear God, and that we are on the road that God has intended for us to be on. And that was very peaceful for me to find that out, and just really I walked away with a strong confidence that this really is what God wants us to do, which is what I always thought, but I just had this short time of doubt that was really just troubling to me, I guess. So God gave me peace in that, and wouldn't you know, probably like a day later I found out that I was pregnant with our Drew. So that's kind of funny the way that worked. Also, with Drewy, when he was born, God, he was working in Aaron's heart, and Aaron, he was able to be in a place where he could joyously look forward to the next child that we have. And I'm sure he'll mention something about that too, but that was really like a miracle that God did in his heart, that he wasn't just going to accept the children as they come, and I don't really know how to say it, but other than after we had our Drew, Aaron, he was looking forward to our next child just because of the way that God worked in his heart. And that truly was, it was a miracle. And sometimes miracles that you can't touch physically or see with your eyes physically, they're just as profound and meaningful, and maybe even bigger miracles than those ones that you can see with your eyes and touch with your hands. I do believe that. So anyways, with my Drewy, my pregnancy was fine, and that was my pattern. I've always had smooth pregnancies, no problems, and it probably was, I think I appreciated that, but I probably took it for granted a little bit as well, because I was just so used to having smooth pregnancies. I thought that would always be the case, maybe. So that didn't really turn out to be the case always, but yeah, so I had a really smooth pregnancy. At the end, when it was time, getting close to time, I had false labor with him, Braxton Hicks contractions, and that was the first time that I've experienced that, probably a few times, and so I thought, well, maybe now's the time that I'm going to go to the hospital and have them, but then they would stop, and so that really caused me to just realize, okay, well, this baby's going to be here soon, and I need to be prepared for him mentally and emotionally. Well, I think we thought that Drew would probably be a girl, so I didn't think him. But not really prepared for him, but prepared to go through labor and delivery. With most pregnancies, when it gets to the end, I have this time where I feel panicky. Just anticipating labor and delivery. I think it's because I've had some difficult deliveries, so I know how things can turn out sometimes and how hard it could be. And so almost every time when it gets close to my 40-week mark, I have to spend some time with God, praying, reading the Bible, listening to worship music, and really just, I don't know, just getting myself mentally prepared. So I remember with Drew, that was something that happened where I just felt, I don't know, like I was having a panic attack or something. I don't want to go through labor and delivery. So one of my friends told me that when she goes through labor and delivery, she had a particular scripture verse that she would think of. And so that's something that stuck with me. And it's Hebrews 12:2, and this is the King James Version. It says, "Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God." And so I think about that for the joy that's set before me, I will endure the suffering that I have to go through with labor and delivery. So, not exactly, I'm not going to lay my life down on the cross, just labor and delivery, but in my experience, that's the most difficult thing that I've gone through physically, so I think about that a little bit. Yeah, but God always, He ministers to me, and He always brings me to a place of peace where I am ready to tackle this task of having this baby. He always gets me ready, but it's not something that just automatically happens. I do have to just spend time either reading the Bible or just turning on my worship music. But He's faithful. So Drew, I labored at home. Well, I had my false contractions, and that helped. That helped to dilate my body some. And then I did have some contractions at home, laboring at home. And then Aaron and I, we walked around the hospital, which is what we normally do, just the hallways and the labor and delivery area, just to help contractions keep on going and bring on delivery sooner. With Drewy, I remember being in the hospital bed, and I had the monitors on my belly, and the midwife says, she was always so cool and calm, and she's like, sometimes the babies like it if you're on a particular side, so why don't you turn over onto your other side? And so I did that, not really realizing the situation. But Aaron said that he saw on the monitor that the baby's heart rate had dropped, so that's why I had to change to the other side. But at that point, his heart rate did stabilize and he was fine. And when it was time for me to push him out, I was still on my side, and my midwife, she went to grab my knee to kind of turn me over on my back, because that's typically how you deliver in the hospital. And I started to feel a pain like in my hip, which is what happens during the pregnancy. Your hips widen, and well, at least for me, and so then I would feel like shooting pains, and so I felt one of those, and I felt like I couldn't move over to my back, and so I just kind of slapped her hand away, and she's like, okay, well, we'll do it this way. So I actually delivered Drewy on my side. I was on my side when I pushed him out, and he came out really quickly, which is the case for most of the babies that I've had, thankfully. He had a cord around his neck, and I'm sure that's why his heart rate had dropped earlier. So she just slipped the cord off his neck, and he was fine. And Drew, number 5, was my I think, least stressful labor and delivery, the whole situation together. My first one, it took me 5 to get to that. My first one, Josiah, I didn't have anything unusual with him. It was just being the first one. That was enough stress in itself, and not knowing what to expect. And then 2 and 3 were difficult deliveries, and 4 was my difficult labor, my only difficult labor, in that my contractions were super close together and super heavy. So with him, I would say Andrew, it was pretty typical labor and pretty typical delivery, other than the cord and me being on my side, which was, I think, kind of interesting. So for Drew, my hospital stay, I didn't have any problems and everything was fine. I say that because we have had some problems at the hospital, and I'll get to those when the time comes, but we haven't experienced any of that between 1 and 5. So my hospital stay was fine. I healed easily, which seems to be the case with every single one of my deliveries, labor and deliveries, all my babies. So that's a blessing. And other than that, I would say that he was my first baby that I strictly breastfed. I anticipated doing some pumping and leaving him to go grocery shopping here and there and having Aaron give him a bottle with my milk, but he would not take the bottle. So I was forced to breastfeed him. And that actually was kind of stressful for me because I thought, like, I don't want to breastfeed him in public. That's embarrassing. But I managed. We figured it out, and that went well. And it actually got me in the habit of breastfeeding. So every baby after him, I just breastfed. And I haven't done any pumping and giving milk in a bottle. And I actually like it better that way. Just my preference, I guess. I think it's easier. I did have, with the first few babies, some problems breastfeeding where it was painful. So it wasn't always easy. But, and even now sometimes I get some mastitis, which is pretty horrible. But I get through it. And I use garlic, and that helps. Eat garlic cloves. We eat garlic cloves a lot because it's super healing. On a side note. Other than that, I wanted to tell you that God named Andrew. When we had our Drew, we called my sister and told my sister, and she said that her husband told her when we said baby's here, baby's a boy, that he said at that point, well, they're probably going to name the baby Andrew, but he didn't tell us that. He told her that. And so Aaron, he's the one who was contemplating names, and he liked Andrew, and we decided on Andrew, and so I texted that to her. Baby's name is Andrew, and she is like, oh my goodness, that's what my husband said that the baby's name is gonna be. And then I texted her what Aaron wanted the baby's middle name to be, which was her son's. No, actually I didn't text her. She said we should name the baby's middle name after her son's middle name because that's what he told her. And I'm like, well, that's what Aaron wanted to name him, the middle name, but I was kind of uncertain about it because I didn't know if we should use that same name. So anyways, we did because it's clearly a God thing that happened. So I was thinking about Drew's name and what it meant, and I thought Drew is definitely one of those boys who is all boy, playing in the backyard, getting into the dirt. And I was thinking that he reminds me of that boy from Old Yeller. I had to look up his name. His name is Arliss. You know, the boy who would be wearing jeans and suspenders and all dirty and getting toads. And that's totally our Drewy. So, it means masculine, manly, and courageous. And of course, Andrew is also a disciple of Jesus and the brother of Peter. So, that is all that I think I have to tell you about our Drew. Yes. Our Andrew. All right. Until next time. Hopefully it'll be soon. Shalom.
Shalom, friends. Aaron here. I was watching Teresa's video about birth story number 5, and I have some thoughts. Before I get into those thoughts, I just wanted to share that Teresa and I had made a video a little while ago. I think it was titled Who Wants 10 Children? And the whole point of that video was to give people some understanding about why we have 10 children. And I think that people feel like it's one of two things. Either, oh, you want all of those kids right off the bat, you know you want a bunch of kids, or you're just compelled by your religion. It's a religious idea, it's a cult, it's a movement, it's whatever it is. And I know that people who don't really truly believe that they're created by a God who's real, that wants to have a relationship with them and speaks to people still today in their hearts and their minds, don't understand what we're talking about. And so, of course, we're crazy to them. But God does speak, and we are people who made decisions individually and then together before we ever had any children to be the sort of people who would know his voice and choose obedience. And so it's true that we made the choice that we made to have children naturally, letting the size of our family play out, because we absolutely believe that that's what God wanted us to do. But it's also true that we want all of our children. So this is the best way that I could put it. My ex-brother-in-law, if you watch our videos about how we got together, you'd know that I had been married briefly before Theresa and I got married, and I tried to save my marriage. It didn't work out. But you can go back and watch those. The video's titled Our Beginning. I think it was 1, 2, and 3. It talks about how we got together. But when we were expecting our first child, we heard nothing but negative things. And just like Theresa mentioned, maybe there's always a little bit of truth behind a joke, and I'll get to that in a minute. I think that maybe there was some of that for people, but at the same time, they didn't realize the power of their words. They didn't really think they were being discouraging, but all of this, of course, you're never going to, have physical relations ever again. You're never going to sleep ever again. Your life is over. Your social life is over, whatever. And it really had an effect on us. Now, we have a much greater understanding about the power of words today than we did at that time, but we were oblivious to it. And we had dinner with my then brother-in-law and his wife, then wife, and they had 2 children. And they were so encouraging, just talking about how great it was to be parents. It was the greatest thing ever. And when we left that evening, got into the truck, started it up, was getting ready to leave, and I just took this deep breath, and it was like a big sigh of relief, and I looked over at Theresa and said, well, gosh, that was encouraging. And it was in that moment that we realized how discouraging so many other people had been and what an effect it had on us. The reason I'm telling that story is just make this connection. Where do you hear in media, and I mean news, movies, television, wherever is it presented that having a large family is desirable or good? No, you're told it's evil, you're ruining the world, you're religious nuts, you're in a cult, you're abusers, you're this, you're that, all these crazy things. I mean, it's everything's negative. Everything's not only is it not desirable, it's presented as being like this terrible thing. It's like the worst thing you could possibly do. And if you do this sort of thing, you must be freaks. You must be some kind of terrible, awful people. You can't really love your children. You can't be caring people. You can't be sane. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that out there. And it's scary. At the very least, it's presented as being this terrifying thing. You're not going to have any money. How can you afford to take care of your children? These are real challenges, but it's put out there as being, you'd be better off drowning in the ocean than having a bunch of kids. And so when you're taking all of that in, and you don't have any idea what sort of an effect it has on you emotionally and the way that you think, how can anybody want 10 children? How do you make that choice? So what we understand today is it's not this black and white cut and dried, it's either this or that, it's either or, because that's not the case. It isn't either or. It's that we made the decision to let our family planning be totally natural, based on what we knew to be God's call on our lives, His direction for us. And in that, we find that it's not a question of just accepting children as they come. Acceptance, there's semantics here. What does that mean to you? So when we use the word accepting, it's this total welcoming into our life. It's this instantaneous change in our being, in our way of being, in our way of thinking, and what we understand our family to be, that we can't imagine. This is life. What was life before this child? This is life. This is what it's meant to be. Our family's complete. And if you haven't watched that video, Who Wants 10 Children, I encourage you to watch it. There's a lot more insight there. But I would say that I never believed ever that we didn't know that God was speaking to us. That's definitely not the case. But I think it scared me. I think it always did scare me. From the moment that Theresa and I had the conversation about it, and again, watch the video, there's a lot in there explaining why we have the family that we have, and I hope it's enlightening. But it was a terrifying thought for me. I'm sure it was for Theresa, I think, but more so for me, I believe. And, as long as there was 3, 4 children, really not getting out of the realm of what most Americans do. 5 children, you got 2 boys and 2 girls, and yeah, you're going to have another one. And now how many can there be? So I really had to, for me, it was like another level of facing my fear. And so my questioning was really just born out of fear. And I think I needed Theresa to confirm that she knew that. Because I didn't want to be this person who's just marching blindly forward. If she had doubts, if she had concerns, and of course, as she stated, and she's not a liar, God relieved all of those doubts for her, if she had any. I think for her it was more like the doubt had kind of gotten around her camp, but had never really gotten inside of her, and she had to just face down her enemy and consider. And she did, and God answered her right away. And then He answered me right away. He did, but I feel like I needed to know that she knew for her, so that I could hear God speaking to me. And it's very much the same way that it happened from the beginning, and that was God speaking to Theresa about how big our family would be, or not using birth control, essentially, and then speaking to me. I needed to know that she was sure of that before I could even consider it, because I'm not the sort of person who would find it very easy to say, well, hey, honey, God says you need to have as many children as He's going to give you. I don't know that I would be able to do that. And it had to be that He spoke to her first, and then spoke to me. And that when He spoke to me, I knew that my wife was confident that that's what God wanted for her, and obviously for us. So anyway, what changed for me was not just this enveloping and acceptance, the next child, but thinking ahead and saying, boy, whoever comes next after this, I welcome them too. It was a change of heart for me. And the change of heart was not in the desire for the children to be part of our family, but it was a change in my heart in letting go of fear, is essentially what it was for me. So I just wanted to clarify that. Also, then I wanted to just talk about quickly when we were in the hospital. We were expecting a girl, only because I was feeling like it was a girl. Theresa really had no clue. My mother will tell you that she knew it was a boy, and she was correct. And we had boy, girl, and so Andrew kept the pattern, boy. And I was just thinking, well, maybe it's time for the pattern to change. I was guessing, because we didn't find out. And it was in the hospital while Theresa was in the delivery room, laboring, that I said, what do you think of the name Esther? And she and I agreed that we liked the name Esther, and that if we had a little girl, in fact, we would name her Esther. So now I'd also been planning to catch the baby. Now I'm going to say that I've heard labor and delivery nurses and midwives use that terminology, and then I've had some say, well, that, catch the baby. Who says that? Well, I mean, I've heard them say it. But be the one to guide the baby out. And I had never done that before, and I was looking forward to it. But during this labor, I was clued into the fact that it probably wasn't the best time to even ask that question. I had now seen 4 deliveries, and I'm observant about certain things. I won't remember what color shirt you were wearing, but I remember what sort of emotions you projected. And I paid attention to that monitor, and I knew that thing worked, how it worked. And I knew what the baby's heart rate's supposed to look like, and I know how it changes during contractions and what's sort of concerning and not concerning. And I'm really observant about people, and I can read people very well. And I'll say this, our midwife who had delivered down here, where we are currently, the 2 children that were our southern babies, because at that time we had 2 that were born in the north and 2 that were born in the south, 2 Yankees and 2 southern children. She's got a very good poker face, and she's very calm, very confident, as she should be, because she's very skilled and has a ton of experience. I could see through her poker face that she had some concern. Not worry, she wasn't projecting any worry, but there was some concern. And she's very good at masking that so as to not project that concern on a potentially worried delivering mother and father. But I could see that she was concerned, and I also could see that when Theresa was on her back and having a contraction, and especially when she was pushing, that Andrew's heart rate was not good. And I don't remember exactly how she ended up on her side, but when she did, huge difference. His heart rate definitely steadied and stayed steady, even during contractions. It might have changed a little bit, but it was pretty steady. And so she stayed there. I think it's funny. I wish I could show you the moment when our midwife reached over to just sort of guide her back onto her back, and Theresa smacked her. She smacked her. And it reminds me that when she's pregnant, especially near the end of her pregnancy, she'll have these awful lower leg cramps. And she wakes me up out of a sound sleep by slapping me, grabbing me, telling me she's having a leg cramp because she can't handle them. They're just that bad, these terrible knots, and she needs me to massage them out for her. And recently, one time, she had one, and she punched me. She just reached over and just straight up punched me. And I mean, to say that I woke with a start is an understatement. I woke up and, well, I didn't wake up. I think I literally just popped up in my sleep. I don't think I heard her telling me which leg had the cramp. I could just feel the tightness in her legs as I'm kind of fumbling, mostly asleep with my eyes closed, I think even, and just started massaging her calf muscle. And it was probably, I was about halfway through massaging that cramp out that I actually woke up and realized where I was and what was going on. Anyway, these hip pains that she's talking about, I don't think she'd ever had one during delivery before. And it must have been a real shooting sharp pain right when the midwife tried to roll her over. And I see something very supernatural in that. Andrew's heart rate was not okay when Theresa was having contractions and pushing on her back. And for her to have this shooting hip pain, only time ever, I wonder if Andrew would have been okay. And I have to tell you, it's just speculation, but I'm pretty certain he wouldn't have been okay had she rolled over on her back. I think he would have had some brain damage. I don't want to say the word, but I mean, having the cord was wrapped pretty tightly around his neck, and just that was the one position he could be in, the way that she had rolled her body, that really released that pressure. And he came out quickly, and it's good. He was a fast delivery, maybe the quickest. And that was just God's hand. That was God's hand all in that. Anyway, he comes out quickly, and I remember telling Theresa right away, well, that's not Esther. Now, we hadn't thought about names at all, I don't think, but we certainly hadn't thought about boy names. So we had to figure that one out. But out comes Andrew. So, I'll tell you what, from the beginning, that boy had monstrous hands. He's still got giant hands. Makes me wonder how big he's going to be. And she says he's all boy. He is. He's a very sensitive boy, though. Sweet and very, very sensitive boy. Theresa and I are both empathetic type people. Sympathy being, you see that somebody's hurting or dealing with some sort of an emotion, and you have sympathy for them. Empathy is more that you feel it, and most people feel empathy more so because they've gone through a similar experience to what somebody else is going through, and then we can feel empathy. Some people could be more so empathetic and feel what other people are feeling, and it's really sort of a sixth sense. It's a spiritual sort of thing, and it doesn't have to do with necessarily with having shared experience. Andrew's like that. He's very empathetic. So he is a dirty boy. He don't need to, man, he don't care if his shirt is filthy. He doesn't care if he's been wearing the same shirt for days. He loves dirt. So he's all boy in that way, and he's loud and he's rambunctious. And I've always said from the beginning, there's a whole bunch of disciples of Andrew running around because he was from the beginning a super loud kid. We used to say about him that his noise level was like the knob was broken and he was stuck on 11. And all the kids that came after him were louder than the first four that came before Andrew. So they're all more like him in that way. Anyhow, Andrew, our boy, yeah. So his name, if I remember this correctly, 4 children, the first 2, we lived around my folks. And so my folks were able to really be there to support us and help us, as other family were, but they were the ones who we would have maybe watch children. Well, watch one child when the second child came. And then when we moved down here for the first 2, for Benjamin and then Madeline, who were born down here, my folks actually came down and stayed with us, and their timing was such that they were down here when the baby was born. And so I was able to spend the first night in the hospital with Theresa and the baby. Now with Andrew, it was different. Andrew came before my folks showed up. In fact, I think he came the day before. And so I had to go home with the children. We had a friend stay with the kids and watch them for a little while at home. But I didn't have that same opportunity to have somebody that we trusted to be there for long stretches of time or whatever. And so I got home, took care of the kids, laundry, fed them, got them clean, all that stuff, and went to bed. And I think had been sort of pondering on the way home from the hospital, leaving Theresa for the first time with the baby. I hadn't done that before. I had actually been able to stage night for four straight pregnancies, and this time I got to go home. So it's different for me. And a little difficult, actually. But I got home, said goodbye to the sitter, took care of the kids, and was thinking on the way home and a little bit as I was kind of drifting off to sleep about names. And very literally, as I fell off, because I was tired, as I fell off, I had just been thinking about Andrew as a first name and was considering a couple of middle names. I don't remember the other one, but I remember James, of course. And I just sort of fell off thinking, oh, what fits with Andrew? I think it's James. I was sleeping. So the next day was busy. I had to get up, take care of the kids, do all this stuff, and then get prepared to go get my folks from the airport. So I didn't make it to the hospital until after I got my folks from the airport. I think Theresa was feeling a bit antsy about that. She wanted me to come, but it really didn't make sense for me to try to get to the hospital with the kids, get back out, and head all the way back closer to where we were living to the airport, and then back to the hospital again. So yeah, I went and got my folks from the hospital, dropped all their gear off. I went to the hospital at that point. Picked my folks up from the airport, if I said hospital. Picked them up from the airport, dropped their gear off at our place, and went to the hospital. So I hardly even got a chance to hold them and visit with them. And it wasn't until that night, so the second night, not the first night he was born, but the second night, that I finally got an opportunity to sort of hang out with Theresa and the baby, which was what I was used to doing. Spend the night if need be. Spend a big chunk of the night. And I think I probably did spend the night, or at least most of it. Giving her a break and holding the baby, changing the baby, that sort of thing. Anyhow, that's that. And then his name, the way the story was we had told, Theresa had probably already told her sister that we were thinking maybe it would be a girl, and probably had texted her when we were going into the hospital. And so her family, wonderful believers, followers of Christ, were praying for us. And our brother-in-law, when they were praying, said either after they prayed or while they were praying that we were going to have a boy. He believed we were going to have a boy and that we should name him Andrew. Like we should, is what his words were. And then when he got done praying, their oldest son, our oldest nephew on that side, said, and they should name his middle name James because that's his middle name. And he was a little boy at that time. He's not a little boy anymore, but he was then. And so Theresa is telling her sister, I think on the phone, that I showed up and we were talking about Andrew and we're going to name him Andrew, and she couldn't believe it. So, well, we were praying and this is what he said, and it was da-da-da-da-da. So then I think she got off the phone with her sister and was texting her when we settled on James as his middle name, and that Theresa hadn't settled on that yet. She wanted to think about it. And so I said, what else fits? Andrew, James, it's perfect the way it flows, da-da-da-da-da. So when she told her sister that we settled on James, they really then couldn't believe it. I believe they were all together and they were talking about it 1,000 miles away from us. And before Andrew came, saying, our brother-in-law saying, well, his name should be Andrew, and then our nephew saying, well, his middle name should be James. And we were thinking it was going to be a girl, and they knew it was going to be a boy. And then them finding out the next day that we named him Andrew James, and there being no connection. It's pretty cool. So there's that, and I wanted to say, the only other thing I wanted to say, I hope I caught it. I talked about the cord being wrapped around his neck, him being a little sensitive, dirty kid who doesn't quiet down and worry about being filthy. He just climbed the trees and play in the dirt and not catching a baby. Talked a little bit about wanting a baby. Yeah, I'll go there. So that second night when I actually got a chance to hang out with Theresa in the hospital with Andrew, what had been really this sort of supernatural experience that we'd had for 4 straight births, we're having it again, where we're, I don't know, decompressing, thinking about the new state of our family, thinking about all that had taken place in the pregnancy and the delivery leading up to where we are now, a family with 5 children. And that's when it really sort of came full circle for me, this change, no longer being afraid of however many children we might have. And I told Theresa that night, the night after Andrew was born, that we're certainly going to have another child. There's no question. Because it was always a mystery. We didn't know, and we still to this day we don't know. And we've not really ever known. And the only other time that we knew for certain that we were going to get another one, that Theresa would get pregnant again, was after Andrew. And I said, we're going to have another one. And the next one will be a girl, and we're going to name her Esther. And Theresa will talk about it in the next birth video, but I'll just touch on it real quickly. From the very beginning, I mean, from the moment Andrew was home with us, Esther was a part of our family. I mean, we knew she was coming. She was promised to us. We really believed that. And Theresa would go shopping and garage sales and estate sales and bring home a little cute little girl onesie and say, this is for Esther. This is for Esther. And this is something we were doing when Andrew was just a breastfeeding infant. So, yeah, Esther was a part of our family the day after Andrew was born. The last thing I wanted to mention was just about Theresa commenting about nursing. And I wanted to say 2 things about that. The first thing is that, I don't know if it was with Andrew or not. I think it might have been. Theresa will watch this and clarify it if I'm wrong. But she had been constantly told that nursing is not supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to hurt. And so she would always be given this impression that she's doing something wrong, which is one of the reasons it was so difficult for her. And we finally had a lactation consultant, totally different sort of person, who was so encouraging, not, oh, you're just doing it wrong. Oh, you feel pain. Oh, you shouldn't. Telling her some people do feel pain early on. You got to push through it, and it'll get easier. And it was such a simple thing. And I hope Theresa will elaborate. I'm sure she has something else to say about it. But it was such a simple thing that really gave her this confidence to say, okay, I'm not doing anything wrong. All right, it hurts. But I think I can believe that it's going to get a little better. And then as it was getting a little bit better, I think her being able to recognize it is getting better instead of being stuck in this, what am I doing wrong? It shouldn't hurt. Just goes to show you where the right people speaking the right words can make all the difference All the difference. And Theresa still has some difficulty with mastitis, and I happen to think that it's because she has a history of it. And I think that the history started, personally, I think the history of it started because she was pumping. You have to figure, if you believe in design and creation, or even if you just believe in evolution, a baby's mouth, whether by evolution or by intelligent design, is very perfectly designed to latch on to a breast and efficiently get milk. I don't care who makes the breast pump. That breast pump is not doing the job a baby's mouth can do to efficiently remove the milk. And as a mom's body is producing this milk, it needs to get out of her body. And if it's not getting out efficiently, then, clogs are likely. Clogs are a real possibility. A clogged milk duct, which is what mastitis is. Now, Theresa gets through that much better these days, and it's because she's learned how to deal with it. And yeah, she knows what to do, because it's sort of the clogged milk duct brings on a bit of an infection, some inflammation, and she knows how to combat that inflammation, and she gets through it. It's really amazing. But I'm not sure that she would be able to do that if she weren't nursing exclusively and trying to pump still, because the pump just doesn't do the job the baby can do. So I just wanted to mention those two things, and I think that's it. So yeah, Andrew, now we were a family of 5, boy, girl, boy, and absolutely 100% expecting Esther to come next, and that'll be the next story. So until then, shalom, friends.